Hello, everyone. This is Ari from Two Credits,
And I'm Taylor.
and today we are not doing a podcast. We are going to talk a little bit about Xbox versus PlayStation instead, because State of Play was last week, and there's been a lot that came out with that. So, I think that we should just start with talking about the fact that Xbox's strategy has just been so bizarre in terms of like the public facing strategy, because they started revealing information earlier last year, and then they finally came out this year and started actually talking about like specifics, like here are the games, here's xCloud. They finally started revealing all this stuff, and just a lot of stuff seems to conflict. Like we've got xCloud coming out, but it's only coming out on Android at first, which is counterpoint to a lot of the other stuff they've been doing, like forcing really like strong backwards compatibility on Xbox Series X with the Xbox One stuff, and then also working on compatibility with Xbox One for all the stuff before that. And they've been really trying to build this platform between PC and Xbox, but then they're coming out and they're saying, okay, this big thing we're doing, this cloud thing that we're doing, the thing that we want people to look at as more of a demo service than anything, isn't going to be on Xbox at launch. And it's very weird. And I'll just let you talk about that a little bit if you'd like, Taylor.
Yeah, sure. So, we talked about it a bit before, just privately, and something that I thought about that, I think probably plays into this is we know, like, they've come out and said for the, like, at launch, xCloud is still going to be running off of the Xbox One S blades. So that stuff. But this is the year when the consoles are taking a big jump up. So what I think is it probably plays into the fact that the hardware for xCloud at launch is not going to be all that great, honestly. Like, we're talking about pretty much like just a bit of a step up from the basic Xbox One hardware, which, it has games that don't even run 1080p on it. So I'm just thinking, like, let's say somebody picks up their new console or whatever, and they want xCloud to be this kind of demo thing, like maybe you can start playing a game before it's even downloaded, to just give it a try or whatever, and then, it downloads so that you can play it locally or whatever. That's kind of something that they've talked about. But that would not be a very good experience if, like, on your new next generation hardware, and then your game that you're trying out is being streamed in from a last generation thing, and then you've also got like all the artifacting from streaming and all that. So what I think is it's probably likely that just for launch, it'll be a lot less noticeable for that kind of thing for people who are playing on a phone, because, the screen is much smaller. They're just not going to notice stuff like that. And plus, anyone who's playing it on a phone, like, it's either that or nothing. So, But it is weird, because it seems like they had wanted xCloud to be this big thing for people to pay attention to, and to be part of their next generation strategy in a way. And it seemed like that's kind of why they were consolidating all this stuff into one Xbox platform, is to have that be a part of it. But it's just really strange that it's not really going to be ready for people in their like main part of their ecosystem to use at the start.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that really strikes me as being a negative in launching exactly only on Android is the fact that you have this audience that plays on controllers all the time, right? So you may have a touchscreen controls, but you're asking people to possibly, depending on what they're using already, buy another controller, like the Razer one that's $100 and wraps around it. And I don't know that a lot of people are going to buy into that, because you can hook up your Xbox controller to a phone, I'm pretty sure, but I'm not sure exactly how that works. And it also requires you to desync it with your existing console or computer or whatever. And I mean, that has been a prohibitive thing for me in the past. Like, I got into the xCloud trial, and I literally would not play it because I did not want to hook up my controller to it, only to have to rehook it up later. And I know that's kind of a petty complaint, but also it was what stopped me from trying it out. That was the only thing. So, I mean, it could be prohibitive in that sense that, like, you have to choose between using a different controller, buying a controller specifically for it, or just like using the touchscreen controls, which I have said to people in the past, like, I don't know about you guys, but I can't imagine playing a lot of these games on touchscreen controls. Like, especially in terms of the triggers, like trying to reach a bumper and a trigger at the same time with only 2 thumbs on screen just does not sound like a pleasant experience. And the other thing, though, is that it's going to be exclusive to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, so I don't see them getting a huge audience of people that are on Android and might have their controllers set up for their Android phone for the original xCloud launch. I don't see that happening, because a lot of these people are already stuck in this one ecosystem, but also they play a specific type of game, and that game possibly doesn't involve controllers. And like, it very likely does not involve controllers. So it's a very weird strategy to launch like this, because you've got 2 different markets that you are playing negatively towards.
Yeah, and to your point about the controller thing, it honestly makes sense because I had an Xbox One X, and I also had a separate controller for my PC. So I had 2 Xbox One controllers, but they were like very distinctly separated. Like, this is the one I use for the console, this is the one I use for my computer, because it's annoying to have to constantly like resync it to the right one or whatever if you're trying to use the same controller for 2 different things. So no, like I think that makes sense, actually, that people wouldn't want to do that, because it is annoying. Like, you have to just do it over again every single time you want to switch over. But yeah, I don't know. It's just weird. Like, it makes me think that, and with the way that Stadia went, it feels like a lot of these streaming services are kind of like they're rushing to put them together, but so they launch in a really weird way, which doesn't, like for Stadia, it made sense for Stadia to launch as an Android thing, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense for xCloud to launch as only an Android thing, because that's not like Android is Google's platform, so that makes sense. Microsoft's platform would be like PCs or Xboxes or whatever, and so it's kind of awkward that they're going to be on Android only, which, by the way, what we haven't mentioned, but that I assume a lot of people probably know, is that it seems like they're not going to be able to get xCloud on iOS at all, which is very bad.
Yeah, and the public feud has been nothing short of unprecedented, but
yeah, but like something that I think is like, as soon as you start calling out Apple as Microsoft, you have to think like there is almost no chance, if not no chance, that they're actually going to reach an arrangement to get xCloud on there. So it seems like maybe it just won't ever be on there. And I think they've talked about just going around them and developing some kind of browser-based solution, perhaps, which could work, I guess, but seems awkward, because then you don't have the convenience of just having an app that people can pop open.
I wonder how that would work with controller support, too.
Yeah, I don't know. But in any case, like, all in all, it seems like it's going to be a bit awkward, because their streaming hardware is old, and it's going to be old until some indeterminate time in 2021 when they say they're switching over to the new blades. And it's only on Android, and you pretty much need to have a controller. Like, some people have posted pictures of playing whatever game without a controller, but that's not going to be a good solution for most people and most games. So it is a very small market, which makes me think like they have to know that not that many people are going to jump on this at launch, which makes me think maybe that's the point. Like, maybe, although they say it's the full release, they're not really going for getting a ton of people on it right away, because it's still the old hardware. It's only for people with Game Pass Ultimate, which is the $15 a month one, which is, the people that are probably already in the ecosystem, because most people who have Game Pass Ultimate already have an Xbox and a PC, which is the whole point of that. Or they at least have an Xbox and they got Ultimate because it has gold bundled in or something. So I don't know, maybe they're anticipating that it won't be that many people right away and they're hoping to build it out more later on. But it just seems like a strange strategy that's hard to piece together what exactly they're going for.
I mean, but also we've been hearing rumblings about xCloud. I think before even they really started talking about the Series X as Project Scarlet. So to have it maybe not even launch with the Series X, possibly because of what you mentioned about it being on 1S blades, it's very odd because you'd think that, I mean, playing into more of what we're going to talk about, they haven't revealed a whole lot that is making the Series X launch look like it's going to be a strong launch. Like, we don't have a lot of games confirmed, and the xCloud thing was supposed to be one of the big unifying features for this entire ecosystem, and it's not going to be there possibly at the Series X launch. And as you said, it's going to be there at an indeterminate time. I mean, we're less than 4 months away from the anticipated launch of these consoles, and we still don't even know what this whole Lockhart thing is. Like, people are anticipating that they're going to talk about it sometime this month, but we don't know for sure. And we don't know whether that's going to be like another console, whether it's going to be like a Blade. We don't know. And it feels like Xbox has kind of rushed into this. Like, they needed another few years to do this, because it feels like what happened was they saw that Sony was much closer than they were, and they kind of scrambled to get it together. Like, okay, we have the hardware, let's just start doing this. But they just started buying a lot of these companies. Like, we haven't had enough time for them to like really capitalize on it, and I think that's the major problem. So when you combine the fact that we're not getting a lot of games at launch, and we have xCloud that's only going to be on Android at launch, it doesn't feel like this is the strongest comeback that they could have had from Xbox One, especially with all the stuff that we've been hearing over the past year or two.
Yeah, so I think what it comes down to is a lot of what you said, and just the fact that, like, so if we go back a bit to the beginning of this generation, it did not go well for them because, they kind of weirdly, as a game console, went away from the game's focus, and we're talking about it as like this kind of media device for your living room or whatever, with the focus on like all the TV features and stuff, which pretty much nobody cared about. And then and they also had that talk about always online for your games and all that stuff. So at the end of the day, with that, they fell way behind the PlayStation 4 eventually.
Also,
And
bundling with Kinect at launch didn't help.
oh yes, and they had the Kinect built in there too, which raised the price of the thing, even though the Xbox was actually a bit less powerful than the PS4 was, which you can see if you look at especially a lot of the earlier games, how they ran on both systems. They tended to run a bit better on PS4 than on the base Xbox One. But the point is, they, if we want to talk about winning or losing, people say they lost this generation or whatever, and they made a really good comeback. But I think people felt they made a really good comeback in the context of like, oh, look at how much they have been doing, with the context of how poorly they were doing before. And I think people, including myself, had this idea that like it's going to be a way stronger start this time, which it doesn't really feel like it is so far. Like, I think people were a lot happier with Xbox in the later bit of this gen, but I think they were also hoping like, oh, they'll start from a much stronger place next time as well. But it really doesn't feel like they are. Like, I think people were hoping, oh, all these studios that they are buying, that means that they'll have a lot of games for their console next time, and maybe they will, but it's not at launch. Like, it's not for who knows how long. And I think that just turns a lot of people right off, because they have a bad recent history of not really having much to play, on their console that's like makes it worth it over the alternative.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people were hoping that the Series X would be kind of like the next Xbox 360. Like, I know that the PlayStation 3 didn't do poorly, right? But also, the 360 really won that generation. That was like the defining console of that generation until the Wii came out, because the Wii captured casual gamers, but let's ignore that for a second. It really kind of captured the early generation. And Xbox was a strong brand at that point, so it was weird for them to then take that momentum and turn it into, okay, we're just going to be a media platform, all around media platform. And then for them to tank so hard. But also, the Kinect didn't do well in the 360 generation. I don't know why they started off the Xbox One generation like that, and why they lost so much of it so early. But they did turn it around. And they had a stronger console at the end of the generation, because the PS4 Pro was a poor showing across the board. Like, there was no reason to buy a base PS4, don't get me wrong, but it was not also a mandatory upgrade like the One X was. The One X was basically a mandatory upgrade if you wanted, like, the better experience. And so they did turn it around, and I think everybody saw the One X as like this, okay, maybe next gen Xbox will be better. But I mean, they've just, even beyond the hardware, they have such mixed messaging right now. Like, they've said that games can be exclusive to Xbox Series X, but the problem with that is that their entire like strategy for this generation is cross-platform. Their entire strategy is to have everything that they do first party on PC and on Xbox. So if that's the case, I don't see a lot of third parties going, okay, well, let's just randomly make a Xbox Series X exclusive. But also, they've bought all of the companies that are making their actual exclusives for their like overall platform. So if they've bought all the companies that can be making exclusives for them, I don't see them granting devs money to have Xbox Series X exclusives. So it's very mixed messaging on that front, and I really don't think that we're going to end up seeing that many actual exclusives as a result.
Yeah, which I mean, for me at least, I find the idea of a console that is more powerful but pretty much only has like third party stuff on it pretty unappealing. Like, obviously they have their own stuff, but as somebody that's in the market of like, okay, I have a PC and last generation I had every console. This time I feel like I can just ignore that console, but like, and obviously I'm not the market because they're not really going after people that have a PC that is capable of playing these games. But I think the awkward thing is, for anyone who normally gets one console who's looking at this, it's difficult to justify to those people why they should even consider getting an Xbox over a PS5 when the exclusives seem kind of like few and far between. Because I know people talk about, oh, well, Xbox has all these exclusives, and they will list you like, oh, Halo, Fable, Forza, all this stuff. But I think if you go on the other side and you look at the Sony stuff, they have, quite a few exclusives, but they also have exclusives from third parties too. Like they have something from Square Enix, and they had something from Gearbox, which was Godfall. And, there's others as well. Whereas Microsoft, pretty much any exclusives on that console are their own stuff. Or they have a few timed things, which they're taking away from other platforms, but I don't think that actually entices people as much as it used to.
No, and I also think that the exact showings that both companies have showed how awkward Xbox's showing has been, because on Xbox's side, you have them trying to be like good old reliable. You've got Halo, you've got Fable, we've got possibly Gear 6 coming at any time, because 5 left on a cliffhanger. So you've got all these keynote like staple franchises that they've had, but they're showing the only one that they've actually shown off gameplay for is Halo, and the Halo gameplay was very clearly not made for Series X. Meanwhile, you have Sony on the other side coming out with Ratchet and Clank looking better than ever, coming out with Crash looking better than ever, if dated, but I'm not going to go into that right now. You've got them coming out with another little Big Planet game called Sackboy. You've got them coming out with Oddworld, out of nowhere, because that's how Oddworld works. But, I mean, like, all these games look like next-gen games, and that's the thing. They immediately showed us gameplay, and they showed us gameplay that belongs in this generation. Meanwhile, Xbox showed us last gen's gameplay and a vague promise of something in the future. And that's really the difference right now. Like, PS5 has a lot of concrete stuff. This is how it's gonna be. We're gonna have exclusives. They're gonna be here. Here's what they're gonna look like. And Xbox is just like, we might have exclusives if they don't get canceled, but also they're not gonna be exclusive. They're gonna be on PC too. And it's very disappointing on the side of Xbox right now.
So, going off of that, do you think a lot of it is, like, a lot of the reason why, to many people, the PlayStation 5 looks a bit more appealing right now, based off of the games that both have shown, that Microsoft has shown for Series X, and Sony has shown for PlayStation 5, do you think some of it has to do with the fact that at the last big Microsoft event, they had a lot of big names of their franchises there, so they had Halo Infinite, which they showed, which a lot of people didn't find that exciting off of what was shown, because as you say, it's clearly not made for this generation exclusively. It seems like something they were working on, kind of like a Breath of the Wild situation, where they've been working on it for Xbox One, and then they kind of just pushed it over because of the timing. But so if I look at the Microsoft event, they had Halo, they had Fable, they had Avowed, Forza, State of Decay 3, so they had their regular names. And then at the PS5 reveal, Sony had stuff like the Demon's Souls remake, Ratchet and Clank, Stray, like all this stuff, Sackboy, which is the Little Big Planet thing, Horizon Zero Dawn, and Spider-Man. So what do you think the big difference is between the exclusives that both have shown that seem to make the Sony ones look more interesting? Is it the fact that they have this generation done such a good job with their exclusives? Is it the fact that they showed gameplay for more of them? Like, what do you think?
Well, I think it's, a combination. It's the fact that they showed gameplay for more of them, but also the fact that we have, like, a clearly varied market on the PlayStation 5. Because, like we said, we've got Ratchet and Clank and Sackboy kind of overlap a little. Then you've got Crash for the, older gamers. You've got the Demon's Soul remake for, the hardcore gamers that never got into that. Especially people that jumped in with Dark Souls. You've got that for them. It's basically a new game to them. You've got Horizon for the open world people. You've got Spider-Man for both the open world and the comic book fans. I mean, there's just so much in there for so many different types of people. And then on Xbox's side, you've got, not to push the stereotype even more, you've got a lot of bro gamer stuff, and then you've got a few things from their newer catalog that, maybe appeal to more people, but, not maybe necessarily. And State of Decay 2 especially was not the greatest showing of Xbox's capabilities, so State of Decay 3 has to make up for that. So I don't think that's the one that's really up there. But also, you have right now the choice between PS5 and Xbox Series X. So you have Forza and you have Gran Turismo both shown off right now before the console launches. So if you're the kind of person that's a variety gamer, or even just a casual gamer that maybe plays racing games, you're obviously going to go with Gran Turismo. There's no question right now, because there's all this other stuff around it. So you've got the variety. So if you don't even want the variety, but it's a nice thing to have, you're going to pick the PS5 because they've got what you want and then some, in case you decide you want the rest of it.
Well, and a lot of the other like there are other racing series as well, like Need for Speed or whatever, that is going to be on both. If it's, assuming they make another one or whatever. So, and I think some of it too is probably like, if we look at this generation, Sony, with pretty much every single exclusive that they've had, has made a big impact with their marketing at the very least. Even stuff like I don't remember the name of it off the
Even
top of my
stuff
head.
like that awkward controller reveal that they did with who? Jeff Keighley? I don't remember. It was awkward.
It was with Jeff Keighley. But yeah, like I think Sony this generation has had a lot of really strong exclusives that made a really big impact. Even stuff that ended up being divisive like Death Stranding, I think visually and in people's minds it made a big impact as something that was at least interesting, if nothing else. Whereas a lot of the Microsoft stuff, it seems like they always like to play it a bit safe. Like, I don't think that Halo really has the same appeal as it once did. And I would probably say the same about Fable until we see more of it, because who even, like, Fable on paper is kind of cool that there's going to be a new one, but we don't even know what it is or like anything about it. So it's hard for anyone to be excited about something when all that we've seen is a frog. That's about it.
Yeah.
So,
and playing off of what you said, I think that basically one of the big things that you touched on there is that a lot of Sony's exclusives, they're in the recent consciousness of gamers. They haven't been gone for possibly a decade or more, or stuck with one game in the past decade like Halo. But also I think the biggest problem is that Halo being the only thing they showed that Microsoft hasn't made a commitment to forward-thinking gameplay. They are very firmly rooted in last generation and before. And that's probably the big thing right now, is that if you take away anything from what gameplay has been shown off, it's that Sony is constantly looking forward. They are taking older stuff and pushing it into the new generation. Whereas Microsoft is hoping that they're going to take their old stuff, do the same shit, and you'll buy it. Kind of. Halo has that whole open world look to it, but it looks exactly the same. It doesn't look like it has changed very much at all. And that is the core difference between the two companies right now. And even I don't really want to rag on it yet because I haven't played it, but even Flight Sim, it's pretty, right? But it's still Flight Sim. And it looks like they're trying to push basically the same model that they did with the older Flight Sim. And that's really kind of my concern going into this new generation, is that Xbox will continue to not look forward. They will continue to stay the same course with better hardware that they're inexplicably not using.
Yeah. And then, also another weird thing is that we kind of, some of the stuff that they're working on, they haven't been showing as much, which seems, a lot of it seems like it's far off, but at the last event, Hellblade wasn't there, which is probably one of the most exciting things that they've shown that people are most interested in after how good the last one was. And Flight Sim wasn't there either, which, Flight Sim is obviously going to be a niche thing because it's a flight simulator, even though it's one of the more... Yeah, that's what I was getting to, is it's one of the... Hellblade and Flight Sim are probably two of the most visually striking things that they have that look very impressive, I'm going to say. But they were both absent. We're not seeing stuff from them on Xbox. Flight Sim has only been PC stuff for now. We don't even know when it's coming to Xbox. And Hellblade seems far off, and they haven't really been pushing it. Whereas I feel like Sony comes out and shows you Spider-Man, more Spider-Man stuff. People know what to expect, and it's just as exciting as it was when they showed Spider-Man before, and people have played it now and they've seen how fun that was. Whereas I don't know, a lot of the stuff that they're showing now, as we say, Fable, who like, not to be rude, but how many people actually are that excited about a Fable game that played the other Fable games?
Given its history.
Yeah. And it's just been so long. Like, it's not an exciting thing in and of itself. Whereas if you show like kind of a mini sequel, which is kind of what Spider-Man is, like kind of a, isn't it kind of like a standalone expansion?
I have
thing?
no idea. They've been
If I
very
remember correctly,
confusing.
they clarified that at some point. I think it's kind of like a standalone. Like, it's not a full sequel, but it's kind of like a standalone campaign, if I remember correctly. So, like, something like that, much more interesting because people, it's in their recent memory, as you said. Or, like, whatever else. Like, Demon Souls, not in recent memory per se, but they've been doing, like, Souls-likes are still very much in fashion, so to speak. So it's very visually striking, again. So I think something like that makes more sense on its own and gets people more excited. And then also, something like Forza. Forza is interesting, but unfortunately, because it's time for motorsport instead of a new horizon, I think that's less interesting to more people because motorsport is the more
Hardcore
like, yes, whereas Horizon is the one that more casual people like myself would be way more interested in. So, I think they have a lot of niche stuff, and they have a bunch of things that they've talked about that we have no idea what they are, or stuff that is very old, like something like Fable.
Or like,
So,
on that note, even like Battletoads. They brought Battletoads back for some inexplicable reason, and they have barely talked about it. It's launching before the Series X comes out. Like, they have this chance to bring back this series that nobody has seen in decades. And they did this with it. Like, they didn't even make it a big thing. They've barely talked about it. Like, I don't understand why they brought it back. Because if they were going to be treating it like that.
I feel like they are more comfortable just having a lot of smaller stuff come out. Just go on Game Pass and just keep people subscribed. Have
that might be
more
fair.
stuff being added in. Which, it makes it less exciting for sure, but if that's their strategy and it works, then I guess it works.
Yeah, but then also, the other thing I wanted to touch on is like, so last year at the big event where they revealed, Project Scarlet, they talked more about xCloud, and they had all the game reveals, they unveiled that they were bringing Phantasy Star Online 2 to the West, and that ended up being one of the first real exclusives from this generation that they released. And that came out in March on Xbox One. And then it came out in, I think, June on PlayStation, or not on PlayStation, on the Windows Store. And then it just came out on Steam on the 5th, which means they got less than 6 months of exclusivity for that. Whatever they gave Sega to bring that over here, because it was clearly a deal, because, I mean, it had been almost a decade since that game came out, and it had not, the signs of it actually coming to the West were like none. It was very much considered dead. And I mean, I do think they made a good move, because even with its low rating because of technical issues, it has consistently outperformed Minecraft according to the top sellers thing on the Microsoft Store. But the thing is, they got less than 6 months of exclusivity of that. The idea of having exclusives on Xbox right now is not appealing when their first game that they really brought over here, that they paid to have as an exclusive, lasted less than 6 months. And even less if you weren't on Xbox One. It lasted exactly 2 months.
Yeah. Yeah, and, I hate to keep harping on it, but I have, I feel like the Sony exclusives, they just know how to make exclusives in a way that makes a big impact and gets people really interested. Whereas a lot of Microsoft exclusives, definitely cool stuff, but, like Cuphead was a big thing, but did Cuphead have the same kind of impact that something like, I don't even know, The Last of Us Part 2? Like, no, not a chance. Or even Ghost of Tsushima, or like any number of other exclusives, Uncharted 4, like they just, it seems like Sony has it down, and like Microsoft has exclusives, but they're just way less exciting whenever they have them. And that's not to say they're not good, but they're way less exciting.
I also feel like the problem is that, especially in regards to the Cuphead thing, Cuphead was popular, right? But as a long-lasting game that people played and didn't just like admire the art of, it was way too niche. Like it was hard. It was very, very hard. Like I don't think that even 10% of the people that bought it would have beaten it. I doubt it, because having played it myself, I did not have the patience for it. Like it just takes so much out of you, and I feel like that is one of the problems with Xbox. They try to go for this specific market of what people would call core gamers. That is like the core of core gamers. That like they want this exact thing. It's not really a wide, like a, it's not a mass market appeal thing. Like, and that's the thing with Xbox that has been consistent throughout their history. And that's why I was hoping that they were going to have more new IPs from, like, you know, Xbox, not just studios they'd bought, is because they need to branch out more. They really desperately need to branch out more. Because right now, they are just targeting a bunch of different niches, like you said. Like, they've got the Forza niche, they've got the Flight Sim niche, but they're all niches. Every single one of them.
Yeah, and I just, I wonder, like, how much interest does the average person have in playing, like, Flight Sim, for instance? I'm going to say, like, I think somebody might boot it up once if they have Game Pass or whatever, but, like, it doesn't really draw people in. And it's fine to have niche stuff, but it just feels like a lot of their stuff that they're hoping to be like sort of their more mainstream stuff, like Halo or something, that just doesn't seem. Even that seems kind of niche to me. Like it, I'm biased, but for me, Halo is a very uninteresting series at this point because it feels like Halo is very much tied down to being one specific thing because the people that are into it have been into it for a long time and they want something very specific. And so, there's the kind of stuff where it's like, they want the weird way of aiming down sights or whatever, or not, or they want like sprinting to not be a thing, or, like all this weird stuff that makes it this very like weird specific thing. And
the
I feel like they're kind of
like
trapped.
Gravity.
Yeah, like I feel like they're kind of trapped into making this one kind of thing, and it's not interesting to me. So I don't know. Like I don't know how far that'll really go because it feels like they just have to make like they can do a new story, but they have to make kind of the same thing again.
Yeah.
Whereas it feels like Sony is happy to go in all kinds of different directions with these franchises because they don't have to always make the same thing.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing about Halo is that like I feel like the MCC's like real stats on Steam have kind of shown that it was great enough for them to put it on there. They made a fuck ton of money from it, but time and time again with every one of these releases, it drops off hard. Like there's that core of like 10,000 people or so that still plays it, which is not shocking considering how influential the series was back in the day. But
yeah,
I don't think that there are enough people that are going to stick with it long term for them to actually care enough about buying an Xbox Series X for Halo Infinite, for example. And like the thing about it is that it is showing its age. Like there's not a proper aim down sights mechanism. You really float when you jump. Like there's so many little things about Halo that are dated and that are never going to get better. And if they do get better, it's not Halo anymore, quote unquote. So, I mean, it really is tied to an older generation that is not really going to help them bring new people into their ecosystem. But also, on the topic of Flight Simulator, they had this huge chance here, right? Because this is a big thing. Like, there are tons and tons and tons of people that are nostalgic about Flight Simulator 10. or FSX, or whatever you want to call it. There are tons and tons of people that are nostalgic about that, and they made one of the prettiest looking flight simulators of all time, and they didn't capitalize on it with the peripherals or anything. Like, they did nothing. And they're just kind of, I don't know. Like, I don't think we've heard anything about, like, add-ons at launch or anything, because the add-on market of FSX has been huge for, decades. And some of these cost upwards of like $300 for one add-on, and people pay that. Like, there is so much they could have done to capitalize on this, and I feel like the only money that they're going to see for this is going to be exclusively like the box sales, and I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, there's so much that they could have done with a lot of this stuff that they're just not doing. And then you look at PS5, and you're like, oh, well, the plates are removable. And, like, just all this little stuff that improves the experience, but sounds inane when you do it, like, when you look at it. But I don't know. It's just, it's very frustrating to watch Microsoft, because I feel like they're flailing, It's like, they flail and they splash a little bit of news up, and it's like, okay, whatever. But
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it just comes down to the fact that they have a bunch of games that we don't even know what they are, and they don't really have a history of making, particularly strong exclusives. Like, I feel like if you ask most people, let's say I can only afford one console and I want to play, like, as much of the best stuff that games have to offer as I can, what do I get? Then it's always the Sony one, because their stuff is better. Like, they just have more, good stuff for kind of everyone. And then, all the third-party stuff goes there too, of course. So, I don't know. It's so far, it feels like going in, Sony stuff, very strong. Microsoft stuff, they have a lot of, like, consumer-friendly stuff, like, oh, your Xbox One controller will work on Series X for everything. Or, oh, look, smart delivery, so you can buy your stuff now and it'll still work. Like, you'll get the upgraded version for free on Series X or whatever. But, like, it's things like that which are cool that Sony isn't focusing on, but none of them make it, like, none of them really move the needle.
I think the problem is that it's like, they all kind of have catches, and they're all catches like PlayStation Now has right now, except for that Sony hasn't focused on PlayStation Now, which is that you can do this, but you have to deal with this, this, and this. And with PlayStation Now, why I used as an example is like, sure, you can stream all these games, except for you don't have like an established catalog, you lose the games, and they're not current gen. But, and like, until like very end of the gen when they finally started adding PS4 games. But,
which they then take back off after.
Yeah, after a very short amount of time. But, like, that's the thing with everything that Xbox has shown. There's a catch with everything. And I don't feel like they're trying to win, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like they're just trying to entice people over to their platform in general, and whether that comes by way of PC or by way of people buying an Xbox Series X, they don't care. That's how it feels. And part of that might be that every console maker except Nintendo sells consoles at a loss. So maybe they're trying a new business strategy whereby they make money regardless of whether people buy the console itself. But on the other hand, like, if you don't buy a Series X and you don't buy into the actual Xbox ecosystem, like, Game Pass still isn't showing that it's going to be, like, an actual strong thing for you. Like, on PC, what we just got the other day was David Revick's It Lurks Below nonsense, Xeno Crisis, which I hadn't even heard of, that Trailmakers thing, which didn't do as well as something else, and Undermine, which I've heard good things about, but I've heard very little about. So, like, I mean, just the consistent PC experience for Game Pass has been pretty meh. So I don't know if they're actually going to bring people into their ecosystem this way or not, unless they keep the price down. Like, if it moves up to $10, I'm canceling the moment it moves up to $10. Like, the only reason I still have it is because it's cheap.
Yeah, so far with Game Pass, it seems like Game Pass is kind of like a nice thing if you're already in, but if you're not already in, like you don't own an Xbox, it I don't think it really changes things for you with your decision because it's nice. It's like it's a nice thing to have if you're in, but if you're not in, then it's not like, and it's more appealing on the console side because it gets bigger stuff. But I don't know. Like I don't know how much. I wish I could just go around and ask random people like I don't know, like what they think about the Game Pass and if like getting these games in theory really changes their decision about which console to buy, but I don't really think that it does. I think it probably is just like, if you're in, then it's nice, but if you're not already in the ecosystem, it probably doesn't really change things for you. Like, you might not even know about it.
But also the important question that nobody's asking is, does this actually carry over to the Series X? Will we actually be getting next-gen games on Game Pass that don't come from Microsoft? Or will publishers and other people look at this differently? Like, will it even matter, because will it just basically be the same as Sony's offering anyways?
No, it's hard to say because there are some pretty big stuff that got onto console Game Pass, but they all got onto it like a while after coming out. So, like a decent amount of time. So I could see some stuff going on there eventually, but I think at launch a lot of the library will consist of backwards compatible stuff that's brought over. Like that just runs. So like the whatever's on there now will probably just run, but I don't think there will be that much next gen stuff on there at launch. Which is like a lot of this is why it's so weird that xCloud doesn't seem like they're trying to make it a big thing for a while. Because I don't know, like it seemed like that was kind of their strategy again was to get people into an Xbox ecosystem one way or another, whether that's by a console or on PC with Game Pass, or whether that's people on other devices using xCloud. But xCloud is kind of like, so far it's not really been too enticing, so I don't know. It feels like they're in a weird spot, and maybe I don't know. It seems like this generation is being set up to be heavily Sony dominated in terms of console sales again.
And I mean, the other thing about xCloud, the implication that we didn't talk about, is like xCloud isn't just not exclusive to the Xbox consoles at launch. It's not on the Xbox consoles at launch, which means it's also not a thing that brings people to Xbox consoles in any way, shape, or form. Which means that it's not. That's that much time that they're spending without that benefit, that people are just going to buy PS5 early and never look at this Xbox Series X again.
Maybe.
I don't know. It's, like I said, it's just frustrating because there's so little to say about Sony's reveal right now because it's just been so on the nose. Like, they've done everything exactly as we expected them to do. Like, everything has been perfectly Sony, and the way that they've revealed things has been perfectly Sony, and that's reliable in the way that we want it to be. We want the reveals to be reliable, not the games to be reliable so much. We want the games to shock us and be, like, amazing for the next gen, but we want the reveals to be reliable. Meanwhile, Xbox has been reliable in terms of games in the worst ways and unreliable in terms of reveals. And it has been just such, like, it's like watching history repeat itself, and you want to shout at Phil Spencer or somebody right now, like, what the actual fuck are you doing? Just, why did you not wait 6 months? Like, the lead that you're losing over Sony by doing this, it can't be less than if you had just waited 6 months.
Yeah, I don't know. like, yeah, that's what I had been thinking about the Sony stuff. Is there's like, what do you even say? Because everything that Sony has done, like last year, it was a bit weird when the new stuff kept coming out from Wired articles. Like that was a bit strange, but like it was fine because they didn't really have anything super exciting for the mainstream audience to say at that point. Like they weren't ready to show stuff, and people got weirded out because they pulled out of E3 and all that stuff. But like clearly, like what it seems like? It seems like Sony just knows like when we have nothing, we just won't say anything. And when we have something, like when we're ready, we'll do this big event, which is exactly what they did. Like with the PS5 reveal, they had gameplay for a lot of stuff, or they had like a lot of stuff that excited people to talk about. Whereas Microsoft, it feels like they felt like they were obligated to do an event, so they did one, and then they were like, okay, what can we put in here? But they didn't really have anything that was hugely exciting in the same way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, I've been saying for a while it seemed like they needed another 2 years to capitalize on this stuff, but like the weird thing about saying that as well, and the thing that really puts a weird spin on everything Xbox right now, is that details have been leaking for a long time. They've been building to xCloud for a very long time, only to have this disappointing reveal. Like this has not been a slow build. Like I mean, this hasn't been a quick build. It's been a very slow build. You know what I mean? Like PS5, we'd gotten some details possibly, but like the actual official stuff that had come out was all in a very short span of time. Whereas Xbox has been just bleeding details for like 2 years now, and it's weird to have seen them have so little after how long they've been building to it. Like,
Yeah.
they were setting themselves up to have the better stuff this generation, and I'd been a little skeptical because of their one platform strategy across both PC and both Xbox consoles. But I was ready to like have like a bunch of stuff spread out in front of me, and that's not what happened. Like they even had a major event last year, and they still didn't have gameplay for us this year, and that's just so weird. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what they've been doing. Like, it's hard to see what they've been spending all this time on, because literally they threw Xbox One S's into the cloud and are streaming from there. Like, they didn't even throw new hardware. It's not even PC hardware. Like, it's so incredibly baffling just what actually came out.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I don't even know what to say. It's true. Like I think, like as I said before, I think a lot of people had in their mind that this was going to be a very strong showing. Like they were building towards showing off some stuff that was really exciting. Like they picked up all these studios, so hopefully they would have, a bunch of new interesting games as exclusives. And then that really just hasn't happened yet. Like that has not paid off so far. These studios that they picked up. Like I don't think that has really changed things in terms of having a lot of exclusives, because it still feels like they don't really have much to entice you over to their console. Whereas with Sony, it's like an easy choice. Like Microsoft, to be fair, I think would have had more stacked against them going into a new generation, because the more successful console of the last one, you already have the momentum and all those people in your ecosystem already. But Sony just did exactly what they had to do, and I don't think Microsoft so far have done what they need to do. And I don't know if they will, because it's kind of getting to be too late. Like what more can they really do? It's clear that they don't have games ready, because a lot of the stuff that they're showing, like Avowed, there's no gameplay on it, which probably means it's pretty early. Or Hellblade, or Fable, which there's, like all that stuff is so far off, and we don't know what it is, and yeah.
And I mean, on that note, it's just you have to wonder, like, okay, so Avowed isn't ready, whatever. They just put out The Outer Worlds last year. But what have they been doing that they could show literally nothing for State of Decay 3, for Fable, for all this stuff that these first-party companies that they've had for ages have been doing? Like, what could they possibly have been doing all this time? Did they just at the 11th hour decide that they were bringing Fable back? Like, did they look at their library and go, you know what? Let's just throw Fable out there. It's so like confusing. I just don't understand what they could have possibly been doing this whole time. And then like there's other stuff, smaller stuff like that they're actually showing off right now, like Tetris Effect Connected being a temporary exclusive to Xbox Series X after being an exclusive on PS4. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I think stuff like some of these timed exclusives that they're picking up, not a good idea in my opinion. Like Tetris Effect Connected, I don't know. I don't think that's. I think that doing stuff like that is just liable to make people angry because it was an exclusive on the other platform, and this is a free update that is presumably being held back simply so that it could be temporarily exclusive for your platform. Or like Yakuza Like a Dragon is going to be a launch exclusive for Series X.
That is really not good because Yakuza has a long-standing history with Sony. That is really not good.
I don't think doing something like that changes anything for anyone. Like I don't think anyone's going to switch over just for that. And it's like big in the Japanese market, which isn't going to get an Xbox. They're pretty much guaranteed not to ever. So what does that even do? Like, sure, you'll get some people over here that might go for that, but I don't know. Like, I don't think doing something like that really helps you all that much.
And I mean, on the note of Tetris Effect Connected, I just want to put it out there. That's something that should have been in from day one. Like, it's a Tetris game. Tetris should have had multiplayer. The fact that it didn't baffled me from the very moment it was released. And I don't understand how more people weren't criticizing the lack of the inclusion of multiplayer. And, like, then you even just looking at other exclusives, Scorn has taken forever, and then it was gonna be 2 parts, and then it wasn't gonna be 2 parts, and now I don't even know. And it's just, that game has been in development for so long. Like, what does this even mean? It's not gonna be a launch exclusive, that's for sure. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. It's very frustrating to watch it go this way after they had recovered so much. Like, they're taking what little momentum they had and doing nothing with it. And
yeah.
And PS5 is like, we had no momentum at the end of the generation, but you know what? Who cares? We got this. Like, they just strolled in. They don't even notice Microsoft over there in the corner. They're just doing their thing and they left. Didn't even look at them once.
It just feels like a lot of the stuff that Microsoft does, like smart delivery, like these little exclusives, like the Dragon Quest XI thing, or like, you know, the Yakuza thing, or whatever. That's all well and good. Or like Game Pass, even. All that stuff is all well and good as like small stuff on the side, but it feels like you've got to have, you know, none of that, even put together, really is all that enticing. Whereas I feel like if you have strong exclusives like Sony, and you have like the recent memory showings of strong exclusives from last gen, that's an easy sell. I don't think, like, nobody cares about smart delivery in and of itself. Smart delivery is only cool if there's cool stuff to smartly deliver, which there isn't really that much. Like, there are a few things, but like, it's not, like, I don't think that all this stuff is kind of just little things that you would think they would use to kind of supplement something big, but it feels like they're missing the something big.
And, I mean, yeah, they are missing something big, but, like, even if we look at the small stuff a little more, like, Xbox all they've got is a little bit of small stuff. And as you said, like, we've got an exclusive for a Switch port. We've got an exclusive for a free update. Like, then Sony has Stray. Stray is a smaller, like, exclusive that was very visually striking and immediately grabbed my attention. And that is not the case with these other games that Xbox is showing. Like, Medium was like, okay, that looks like it's gonna get annoying. You know, like, it's cool that they have these two worlds thing, but, like, how will that actually feel? And stuff like that. And I'm like, did they not even look at the games that they're grabbing? Like, I don't know. It's hard for me to, like, express the exact frustration that I have with it.
I think there's probably just a lot that's built up over time.
Yeah, so I think we're going to leave it there, though. I think that's a good place to stop.
I think that's enough ragging.
Alright, so take care, everybody. See you next time.
Yeah, see you.